everyone. This is Jen Edgington with the Civil War Museum in Kenosha, and I'm here for another I've Heard of Her, our monthly program dealing with women's history, and in this case, we're going to be talking about Lizzie Borden. This program is on the third Thursday of every month, and usually I have Samantha with me, but today it's myself, and we're going to be talking about Lizzie. So let's dive in. First things first, we do this program for a lot of different reasons, but one of the main reasons is we're still in the 100th anniversary of women's suffrage, so gaining the right to vote. And we wanted to highlight different women's stories that maybe you've heard about before, but you didn't know why. Like today, we're going to be talking about Lizzie Borden, who we've heard of, but maybe we don't necessarily know why she was famous, which might be a good thing. So we'll get started. We're going to talk about Lizzie. A few disclaimers really quick. One is that there's not that much known about Lizzie Borden before or after the murder trial. So her kind of identity really focuses on this murder trial. So you're going to be hearing a lot less about her and more about things that involved her. And then the other thing is, I'm not going to be going into any gruesome details about a murder. I want to make sure that everyone's comfortable watching this. So no worry about that, but I am going to say it's still talking about murder, so there might be some trigger warnings there. So just a heads up. All right, so let's talk about Lizzie Borden. Lizzie is her real name, not a nickname. So she was born Lizzie Andrew Borden, and she was born in July of 1860. She grew up in Falls River, Massachusetts, which was kind of this small textile town outside of Boston. It's about 50 miles away. It's pretty close to Providence as well. She is the second child of Andrew and Sarah Borden. So she has an older sister named Emma. And Sarah, unfortunately, does not live a long life. She dies in 1863. So when Lizzie is very young, and Andrew remarries 2 years after that to a woman named Abby. So she becomes Abby Borden, and throughout her whole life, Lizzie is not close to Abby. She refuses to call her mom. She actually has to call her Mrs. Borden. So there's a lot of tension that happens between them. However, the few things we do know about Lizzie is she grew up very wealthy. Her dad, Andrew, made a lot of money. He invested in banks, he invested in a mill, he invested in real estate, and his worth was around $7 million today. So back then, that was still about $300,000. It's still a lot of money. So Lizzie grew up very fortunate, and so did Emma. And a lot of the tensions that stem before the murders really comes from this wealth, because her dad still feels like he has to live a modest life. He won't move them to the nicer part of town where they want to move. He's living in kind of a modest house in an area of town that's not great. He also ends up loaning money to his sister-in-law, to Abby's sister, and the daughters really do not like that. So there's starting to be some tension. The girls are in their 30s and still living at home. So the Borden sisters are still living at home right before the murder takes place. So let's go into what she's known for, and that is the murders. So what happened? On August 4th, 1892, in the middle of daylight, right close to downtown Falls River, 2 people were murdered in their house. So Abby was killed upstairs in the Borden residence, and Abby was into her 60s by this time. So Abby's killed upstairs, and then downstairs, Andrew, the father, comes home. He goes to take a nap, and he is murdered on the couch. So we often, unfortunately, hear the really morbid nursery rhyme about how many whacks with an axe. A hatchet or an axe was used. However, it was not as many as the nursery rhyme will lead you to believe. So it was a grisly scene. It was pretty gross, pretty graphic. And so it made it kind of memorable because it was such a violent crime. During this time, so 2 murders, no one is seen going in and out, and as well, there's no motive inside the house. There's nothing missing. It doesn't look like it was a robbery. And there are no known arguments, anger, beef between Andrew, Abby, and anybody else. So let's talk about who are the suspects, or who are the potential suspects. So we know Lizzie's uncle, who was Sarah, her mother's brother, was visiting them, which he didn't normally do, but he was trying to get into business with Andrew or even ask for a loan. So he was staying at the house at the time. Emma, her sister, is obviously a suspect, but we'll get to her in a minute. And then they also had an Irish maid named Bridget, and she's in her 20s, and she lived with them, so she was a live-in maid, and she plays an important part in the story. And then there's Lizzie. Lizzie's in her 30s. She is described as a 5'4" secretary of local Christian Endeavor Society. So anytime Lizzie is talked about, she's kind of seen in this very high-class Victorian way. So she's rooted in religion. She helps with charitable organizations. She's seen as kind of this traditional Victorian woman who's continuing the Victorian norms. So she's not an ideal suspect for these murders, but unfortunately she is a suspect. And so let's talk about their alibis. So Emma's actually out of town. She was not around. The uncle ends up eating breakfast with everyone, and then he goes out on town to go do business, and he does not return until after the murders. The father ends up eating breakfast, going out around the same time as the uncle, and he does not return until about 10:30, 10:40, where he ends up taking a nap on the couch. So he actually did not know about Abby being upstairs. Bridget is home the entire time, but Bridget claims that she is washing windows outside, which is a large job, and then she did not feel good from potential milk issues like the rest of the family, and so she actually went up to her bedroom on the 3rd floor. And then Lizzie is seen by a neighbor out in the yard. She claims that she spent all of her time in the barn or in the yard, but Bridget did see her in her house when her father came home around that 10:30, 10:40 time. So basically what happens at around 11:10, a little shortly after, Lizzie wakes up Bridget, says something happened to father, please go get a doctor. And when the doctor comes, he actually says that Andrew died about 11 o'clock. So there's a very short window between death and discovery there. And so that's kind of the what happened, the who's, and who are the suspects. So after a 3-day inquest, Lizzie is identified as the main suspect, and she's arrested for the crime and put on trial. So in between that time of arrest and the trial, she's writing a lot of notes to her friends. She's trying to really understand why she's in jail and spending her time that way. So I want to just read a few of her letters to show kind of her mindset. She's really upset. She's really not doing well in jail. So, my friend, do not make any plans for me at Christmas. I do not expect to be free, and if I am, I could not join in any merrymaking. I don't know that I ever could again, certainly not at present. You know my life can never be the same if I ever come home. And then she also writes to another friend, my spirit's in an ebb tide. I see no ray of light amid the gloom. I try to fill up the waiting time as well as I can, but every day is longer and longer. So Lizzie's feeling it. She's not liking what happened. She doesn't like what she was in jail. So the trial starts almost a year later, and you can bet that Lizzie Borden had the best attorneys that money could buy. And so her attorneys were Melvin O. Adams, who graduated from Dartmouth, former governor, as well as a Harvard graduate, George D. Robinson, and Andrew J. Jennings, who graduated from Brown's, but more importantly, he's Andrew Borden's attorney. So she ends up getting her family lawyer to defend her against her father's death. So I think that that's shows if he believed her or not. And so some other kind of key things that come out during the trial. It starts with the prosecution opening with, "Today, a woman of good social position, of unquestionable character, a member of the Christian church and active in good works, the own daughter of one of our victims, is at the bar at this court, accused by the grand jury of this county of these crimes." So even the prosecution is already starting to paint her as, look, she's a good Victorian woman. She's of Catholic or of Christian faith. She's how could she possibly have done this? But of course, the prosecution then does introduce evidence that might contradict that, and the defense is fighting for Lizzie. And so some of the things that really kind of come up are during the trial, her friend is called up, and first things first, she says that Lizzie, before the murders, was depressed and was worried that something would happen to her. So she had verbally said that to her friend. The second thing she had said to her friend was she was afraid someone had poisoned their milk because the entire family got sick almost a day or few days before the murder. So if you remember me saying Bridget was upstairs because she wasn't feeling good, that's what she wasn't feeling good from. There was a pharmacist in town that does say that Lizzie Borden did go to the pharmacy to buy acid from him, but she claims it was to clean a sealskin kind of cloak she owned. He refused to sell it to her because of not having a doctor's note. However, all of this just adds kind of fuel to the fire of this trial. So people speculate that she might be responsible for this attempt of poisoning. Some people don't think they were poisoned at all. They don't have the milk or the evidence to kind of try that. But the most damaging thing the friend says is that she actually stayed with Lizzie and Emma after the murders, and she caught Lizzie ripping up and burning one of her dresses. Lizzie does claim that it was because there was paint all over it, but the friend was unable to see. So that happened. Bridget gets on the stand, and she says that after they found Andrew's body, they were unsure where Abby could be. So Lizzie kind of said, "Oh, I thought she got a note and she was going to go visit a sick friend." So Bridget said, "I'll go find her." And she went to go out on town, and Lizzie quickly changed her story and said, "Oh, I thought I heard the door though. She might be upstairs." The doctor went with Bridget, and they did find Abby upstairs in one of the bedrooms. So that seems a little fishy too. Throughout the house, they did find hatchets and axes, and one was broken and it was freshly cleaned. So that was something of note. And then Lizzie herself claimed that her father had lots of enemies, and she had actually seen one arguing with him earlier in that week. And the doctors who performed the autopsy, they got pretty graphic, as you would, speaking about autopsies. And during this, Lizzie actually has to be removed from the room. A few times during the testimony, she of different people, she passes out. She faints. And so I just wanted to make sure that we kind of have this whole story of Lizzie's behavior in the court and what is being said. And one last thing that the autopsy people do say, the doctors say, is that the person who committed this crime would have a lot of blood on them and in their hair, on their clothing. And so, again, Lizzie didn't have a lot of time to change between. So it leaves it to the jury, which is made up of 12 men, not from Falls River, who are mainly laborers and farmers, not necessarily reflecting the wealthy background that Lizzie herself comes from. They all vote her innocent. And the reason that they do is they say that the evidence presented was not enough to convict her, and especially because her trial was basically, she would die if she was proven guilty. She would be executed by the state. So they wanted to make sure that they were very thorough. They didn't have enough evidence. They couldn't convict her. But they were also, there was a lot of Victorian gendered roles that kind of played a part in this. They saw her as a Victorian woman of good Christian standing, that helped the community. Surely this person could not be involved in such a horrific and graphic act of violence against her own parents. So we don't know if she did it or not, but the finding is she's innocent. So she never leaves Fall River, which she probably should have because of how the community acted. Some people wrote stories about how she really did do it and sell books kind of outside her house. Some people would knock on her door and run away in the middle of the night, or would try and scare her. So she continues to live with Emma. At first, they live in the same house that their parents, or their dad and stepmother, were murdered in. They soon move out and get their own house. About a year after the trial, less than a year, she does go to the World's Fair in Chicago of 1893 with a bunch of friends. She really loves traveling, so although she lives in Falls River, she finds that she travels more than before. And part of that is because she doesn't want to go shopping or be around Falls River because of all of the stories around her and people kind of speculating, did she do it, didn't she do it? And then in 1905, she does have a huge falling out with her sister, and they never speak again. And she ends up dying on June 1st, 1927 of heart disease, and her sister dies about 9 days after Lizzie dies. They had not spoken since 1905, even though they were very close. So that was kind of a very quick version of the Lizzie Borden case and the trial. So if you've ever seen these programs before, you know Samantha and I love to ask these big questions. And I don't necessarily want to know if you think she did it or not, but I want to know, why do we remember Lizzie Borden's trial and the crime? Because there has been so many other trials and crimes that have taken place before, during, and after this, but this Lizzie Borden one sticks out to us. So why do you think we remember this trial more so than anything else? And I know we're coming up to doing another one in November, and Samantha hopefully will be back. And so that is on November 19th. We are going to be talking about Sarah Emma Edmonds, who is a Civil War soldier, and we will learn more about her next time. So thank you so much for watching. We hope that if you like this, you find more programming at our museum and continue to watch our social media for more updates. Thanks so much.